When a liberal TV host tried to ambush Donald Trump with questions about his marriage on live television, she had no idea it would turn into the biggest mistake of her career. But before we dive in, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. It was primetime major network Millions watching live. The host was infamous for her gotcha moments with conservative guests, and tonight she thought she had the perfect trap set. Her team had spent weeks crafting questions designed to humiliate Trump and attack his family values, but she had no idea what was coming as the cameras started rolling. Trump sat calmly in his chair while the host wore that signature fake smile of hers, the kind that media elites use when they think they're about to destroy someone's reputation. 3, 2, 1. What happened next would not only shatter her career, but show America what standing up for real family values looks like, and it all began with what seemed like an innocent question. Mr. Trump, you've built an empire. Become president, influenced millions. Would you say you're just lucky? She delivered it with that practiced smile, the kind that makes you wonder what's really behind it. But Trump had seen this game before. Start soft, then twist the knife. He leaned forward slightly, his expression a mix of confidence and amusement. You know, it's interesting you asked that. Trump responded, his voice steady and measured. The liberals love that word lucky. They use it to diminish success, to suggest that hard work and sacrifice don't matter. But let me tell you something about luck. It doesn't build skyscrapers, it doesn't create thousands of jobs, and it certainly doesn't make America great. You could see it in the host's eyes. This wasn't the defensive response she'd hoped for, but she pressed on, her smile tightening just a fraction. So you're saying everything you've achieved is purely through hard work? I'm saying, Trump replied, his voice gaining intensity, that success comes to those who earn it. Yes, I've been blessed, but I've also worked harder than most people can imagine. I've had nights where I didn't sleep, deals that seemed impossible, challenges that would have broken many others, but here's what really matters: I've never done it alone. The host's eyebrows raised slightly. There it was, the opening she thought she'd been waiting for. Little did she know she was walking right into a conversation that would expose far more about herself than her target. Not alone, she asked, her voice dripping with false curiosity. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the people behind Donald Trump. Of course, when you mention the people behind me, Trump continued, you're probably thinking of my business partners, my advisors, but let me tell you who really deserves the credit: my family, particularly Melania. The host expression shifted almost imperceptibly, like a predator sensing weakness. She thought she'd found her angle. Ah, yes, Melania. You know, many people wonder about her role in all of this. Some say she's rather quiet for such a powerful man's wife. Trump's eyes narrowed slightly. The studio air grew thick with tension as he replied, quiet, number dignified. Yes, there's a big difference, though I understand why some in the media might not grasp that concept. A nervous titter rippled through the audience. The host shifted in her chair, clearly not expecting this pushback, but she pressed on, her voice taking on a concerned tone that fooled no one. Well, what I mean is we rarely hear from her. Unlike other political wives who are very visible, don't you think the public deserves to know more about the woman behind Donald Trump? The public, Trump responded, his voice carrying a mix of pride and protective steel, knows exactly what they need to know about Melania. She's brilliant, accomplished, and chooses her moments carefully, unlike some who feel the need to fill every silence with noise. The audience murmured in approval. The host's practiced smile faltered for a moment as she realized her usual tactics weren't working, but instead of backing off, she decided to push harder. Let's talk about those accomplishments, she said, her tone shifting to something more aggressive, because some people say, well, they wonder if her main achievement isn't simply being Mrs. Donald Trump. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Trump's expression hardened, and even the cameraman exchanged glances. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in television history. Let me be very clear about something, Trump said, leaning forward slightly. Since you want to talk about achievements, let's talk facts. Melania speaks 5 languages fluently. She's built her own successful career. She's represented our country with more grace and dignity than any first lady in recent memory. But you wouldn't know about that, would you? Because the mainstream media is too busy pushing their own narrative. The host, sensing she lost control of the conversation, tried a different approach. Of course, Mr. Trump, but don't you think that being married to you has opened certain doors for her? Yours, Trump chuckled, but there was no humor in it. You know what's interesting about that question? It shows exactly what's wrong with how some people think success isn't about doors being opened, it's about what you do once you're in the room. And Melania, she doesn't just walk through doors, she transforms every room she enters. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. The host face flushed slightly as she realized her narrative was crumbling, but surely, she pressed on, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. You must admit that your position, your wealth, your influence, it all affects how people see her. Trump's response was immediate and sharp. You mean how people like you see her? Because let me tell you something about influence and wealth. They don't create character, they reveal it. And what Melania has revealed through every challenge, every attack, every unfair criticism is exactly why I'm proud to have her by my side. The host's smile had completely vanished now, but she was about to make her biggest mistake yet. Well, since you mentioned being by your side, the host said her tone growing bolder. Let's talk about that. Your lifestyle, Mr. Trump, the constant spotlight, the pressure, the scrutiny. Don't you think it's challenging for someone who didn't seek this kind of attention? You know what's really challenging? Trump countered, his voice carrying a note of controlled intensity. Watching the media twist everything into their own narrative. Melania didn't just adapt to this life, she's thrived in it despite constant attacks from people who claim to champion women's empowerment. The host leaned forward, sensing what she thought was vulnerability, but the pressure must be enormous. The constant travel, the public appearances, the expectations. Some might say it's almost like a golden cage. A golden cage? Trump's eyebrows raised. That's an interesting choice of words. Tell me something. Why is it that strong, independent women are celebrated by the media? Unless they happen to be conservative, then suddenly they must be trapped or caged. The audience murmured in agreement. The host's composure cracked slightly as she realized her narrative was backfiring. I'm simply suggesting, she tried to recover, that perhaps this isn't the life she envisioned for herself, being constantly in your shadow. My shadow? Trump interrupted, his voice carrying a mix of amusement and indignation. I think you're confusing shadows with spotlights. Melania doesn't walk in anyone's shadow, she shines in her own right. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because your kind of journalism isn't about truth, it's about creating shadows where there aren't any. The studio grew unnaturally quiet. The host producer was frantically speaking into her earpiece, but she had already committed to her course. She was about to cross a line that would make television history, and not in the way she'd hoped. Her next question would shock everyone in the room. Mr. Trump, she said, dropping all pretense of professionalism, let's be direct. You're a powerful, wealthy man. You could have any woman you want, yet you stay with someone who, she paused for effect, aging alongside you. Don't you ever think about trading up? The silence that fell over the studio was deafening. Several audience members audibly gasped. Trump sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Trading up? He finally repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Let me tell you something about value, since that seems to be all you understand in business. Yes, sometimes you trade up, you find a better deal, a newer model, a shinier option, but we're not talking about real estate or cars here. We're talking about my wife, my partner, the mother of my son. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on the host. And let me tell you what real value is. Real value is someone who stands by you when the cameras are off. Real value is someone who tells you the truth when everyone else is telling you what you want to hear. Real value is loyalty, integrity, and character, something that clearly isn't taught in journalism school anymore. The host's face had turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but Trump wasn't finished. You know what's really fascinating, he continued, his voice gaining strength. You sit there asking if I've thought about trading up, while demonstrating exactly why your ratings are trading down. Because you don't understand real value, you don't understand real relationships, and you certainly don't understand real respect. The audience erupted in scattered applause, but the worst was yet to come for the host. Her attempted recovery would only dig her hole deeper. I didn't mean to suggest, the host stammered, but Trump cut her off. Oh, but you did. You meant exactly what you said, and that's the problem with the mainstream media today. You say these things, you make these implications, and then you try to backtrack when someone calls you out. But let me finish explaining something about real relationships to you. The host visibly squirmed in her chair as Trump continued, his voice carrying the weight of someone speaking not just to her but to everyone watching. Melania and I have built something most people dream of, a partnership, a true partnership, not the kind you write about in your gossip columns, not the kind you try to tear down with your gotcha questions. We've faced challenges together, we've celebrated victories together, we've built a life together. He paused, letting his words sink in. The studio was completely silent now, every person hanging on his next words. And you sit there suggesting I should consider trading up? Let me tell you what that really means. You're suggesting I should abandon loyalty for vanity, trade substance for surface exchange, real love for what? A younger model? That's not just insulting to Melania, it's insulting to every woman watching this show. It's insulting to every person who believes in real relationships. The host producer was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but Trump was on a rule and everyone knew interrupting now would only make things worse. You want to know why I stay with Melania? Because she's irreplaceable, not because of her looks, though she's beautiful inside and out, but because of who she is, her strength, her grace, her intelligence, her heart. These aren't things you trade up for, these are things you treasure. The audience had begun nodding in agreement, some were even wiping away years, but Trump wasn't done. He was about to deliver the knockout blow that would make this interview legendary. And let me tell you something else, Trump continued, his voice now carrying a tone of authority that filled the studio. The fact that you'd even ask that question shows everything that's wrong with how the media views relationships today. You think everything is disposable, marriages, commitments, values, all just commodities to be traded on your marketplace of sensationalism. He gestured to the cameras, to the studio audience, to the whole setting. You invite people onto shows like this pretending to have meaningful conversations, but what you really want is controversy, drama. You want that viral moment. Well, congratulations, you're about to get one. The host's fake smile had completely vanished. Now she looked like someone watching their career implode in real time. Mr. Trump, I think you're misinterpreting. She tried to interject. No, And here's the thing about true partnerships, Trump continued, now speaking with calm certainty. They get stronger with time. Every challenge you face together, every victory you share, every storm you weather, it all builds something that your kind of shallow thinking could never understand. The host, desperately trying to salvage the situation, attempted one last defense. Mr. Trump, we're just trying to have an honest conversation about honest. Trump let out a short laugh. You want honest? Let's be honest. You came here hoping to embarrass me, to suggest that my marriage is just about appearance or convenience. Instead, you've shown everyone watching exactly why the American people don't trust the media anymore. He gestured to the audience, to the cameras. Look around this studio. Every person here knows exactly what you were trying to do, and every person watching at home knows too. They see through these tactics. They understand what real relationships look like. The host face had turned an alarming shade of red. Her producer was now frantically signaling for a commercial break, but Trump held up his hand. No, let's finish this, because there's one more thing everyone needs to hear. The studio fell completely silent. Even the cameraman leaned forward slightly, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would be replayed for years to come. The reason your question about trading up bothers people so much, Trump said, his voice carrying a mix of authority and genuine emotion, isn't just because it's disrespectful to Melania. It's because it's disrespectful to every couple who's grown older together, to every relationship that's weathered life storms, to every marriage built on something deeper than what you see in your Hollywood magazines. He paused, looking directly into the camera. You know, there are millions of Americans watching right now who have been married for 20, 30, 40 years or more. They've built lives together, raised families together, and you sit there suggesting that all of that should be thrown away for what? A younger face. The host attempted to speak, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Trump pressed on. This isn't just about defending my marriage. This is about defending every marriage based on real love, real commitment, and real values, because that's what makes America great. Not the shallow values you're pushing, but the deep, lasting bonds that hold families and communities together. The audience burst into sustained applause. Several people were on their feet. The host producer had given up trying to salvage the situation, knowing this moment would live forever in television history, and Trump wasn't quite finished. His final words would become the most quoted part of this now legendary interview. Let me leave you with this thought, Trump said, rising slightly from his chair. To every person watching who stood by their spouse through thick and thin, who's chosen loyalty over convenience, who build a real life with a real partner, you're what makes America great. Not the media elite with their twisted values, not the Hollywood crowd with their disposable relationships. He turned back to the host, who seemed to have physically shrunk in her chair. And to you, I hope this teaches you something about real journalism, real relationships, and real respect, because right now America isn't just watching me defend my wife, they are watching you expose everything that's wrong with today's media. The audience erupted in a standing ovation. The host producer finally managed to call for a commercial break, but the damage was done within hours. Clips of the interview would go viral. Social media would explode with support for Trump's defensive of marriage and family values, even as critics would have to admit this was a masterclass in turning the tables on a hostile media. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And remember, real relationships aren't about trading up, they're about standing strong together. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on this.